You're listening to This Week in America on the Blue Funk Broadcasting Radio Network. Great to have you with us on the program today. Back once again, Karen Golder, a member of Fort Wayne City Council, Fort Wayne, Indiana, a major Midwestern city. We're talking about impact of the economy on cities all across the country. A recent study shows that out of the 100 largest cities, they drive about 3/4 of the economy for the United States. Karen is back with us. Welcome back to This Week in America.
Rick, thank you. It's good to be back.
Let's talk about stimulus. And there's this great debate. Is it working? Is it going fast enough? This started as a great idea, focusing a lot on infrastructure. And we all said this is great, and everybody compared it to the WPA. But by the time it gets through Congress and the representatives are all concerned about their parochial interests, so suddenly you've got, it's not all infrastructure, it's some of their pet projects. Then it gets to the state level where the same thing is done. Taking your role as a council person in Fort Wayne, Indiana, how effective has the stimulus been? And did you get what you felt was needed to make some of these changes and to bring people jobs?
I'm a little bit disappointed in how things have played out. For instance, on the infrastructure side, which, as you point out, was kind of the original thought behind the stimulus, although by the time it got through Congress, not only were there the pet projects, but then huge amounts of tax cuts, some of which I think were stimulative, and some of which were, frankly, just had to be thrown in to get enough votes to appear to make it bipartisan or whatever. That's a different show. But so let's look at us. Indiana got nearly $700 million in stimulus money for transportation projects, roads, streets, bike trails, and so forth. The city of Fort Wayne will get $3.5 million of that. So let me just say that again, nearly $700 million to the state of Indiana, and of that the state gives the city $3.5 million.
And by the way, Fort Wayne is the second largest city.
We are the second largest city.
In Indiana.
We're significantly larger than the third largest city. We are in the largest county geographically in the state. So, yeah, it's just kind of mysterious. And that pattern, as I understand it, is very typical across the country, that roughly 2/3 of the money that the states got, they kept in transportation. Now, states have infrastructure needs as well. I mean, as a citizen of Indiana, I'm better off if the state can fix Interstate 69,
right,
for instance, by our house, But what's frustrating is a lot of citizens, I think, anticipated that there was going to be all this money and that they were going to finally be able to get their road fixed. And that's just not happening. I mean, concrete construction, for instance, costs about $1 million a mile on average, $900,000 to $1 million a mile to rebuild a street. And I already told you we had $3.5 million. We've got about 50 miles of inadequate or in need of repair concrete streets in our city. Well, that's $50 million. We got $3.5 million. So that's okay. I mean, it's not that the Congress owed us all of our street money, but it's not going to go very far. Now, what it will be able to do is get some people back to work fairly quickly. The frustrating thing is at the local level, we can typically move a lot faster in getting projects bid and out. So, because our projects are smaller. Fixing an arterial street in Fort Wayne, Indiana, simply takes a lot less engineering than fixing an interstate.
Right.
And so it doesn't take nearly the time to go through all the design phase. To be perfectly honest, the city's processes for spending money are more efficient than most states. And so we can just get it out faster. Right now, the people who are benefiting primarily from the stimulus are the engineers. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, those, that's jobs too. But it's not happening nearly as fast as I think a lot of people, including myself, frankly, last winter expected that it would.
You're listening to This Week in America on the Blue Funk Broadcasting Radio Network, website thisweekinamerica.us. Karen Goldner is with us, a member of Fort Wayne City Council. We're using Fort Wayne, 70th largest city in the country, as an example of major U.S. cities that basically drive the economy, the problems they're having in that economy. When you're talking about stimulus, you want to spend it quickly. Everybody thinks it's to be spent quickly. At the same time, we're asking for transparency. It doesn't seem like the two necessarily go hand in hand. It's hard to set up a procedure, checks and balances, transparency, and get it out there right away.
Right. I mean, you really have to have a balance. And there's, on the one hand, you have kind of a model of a dictator who does whatever he wants, but, makes everybody unhappy. And has, there's no liberty, and on the other hand, you have a group of people sitting around trying to decide whether they're going to go out to dinner that night, and they can't decide. So you have kind of those two extremes, and the challenge of any kind of government is to figure out where we are in the middle. I mean, where's the right balance? And certainly in a democracy, that's what we attempt to do. And so part of the delays do have to do with that transparency, although a lot more of the delays simply have to do with kind of existing bureaucratic processes that do not lend themselves to quick change. You simply cannot tell a State Department of Transportation bureaucrat to speed it up, because they don't know how to do that. They have rules and procedures that they have to follow, and those procedures take time, and so they can work a little bit faster, but you're not going to get a much better result. So that's one of the challenges.
I think about when we went into Iraq, we needed to get money on the street as quickly as possible. Forget transparency, checks and balances. We trust our people over there. We've got to get it out there. Literally suitcases full of money disappeared. So it's like, okay, maybe transparency isn't a bad thing if you can strike that balance. So transparency is not going to take 2 years to pull off. We got about 30 seconds left.
Right. Well, and the last thing I'd say on that balance is that balance is different in every single person's mind, the appropriate spot of balance. And so you sort of end up having to balance the balances,
right.
kind of. But that's just government. That's okay.
Running out of time. In fact, we are out of time. Karen Goldner has been with us, a member of Fort Wayne City Council, Fort Wayne, Indiana, one of the country's top 100 cities. We'll have Karen back and talk about, we've talked before about juggling all the services. You don't want to just tread water, you want to grow. So how do you figure out how we do economic incentives? Fort Wayne just had undergoing a rebirth downtown with a great new ballpark. How do you give incentives, subsidies, that type of thing, tax abatement, when you don't have a whole lot of money in the first place? So how do you grow, not just maintain where you are, but how do you grow? And we'll talk about it. Plenty of time to think about that. We'll talk about that with Karen next time. You're listening to This Week in America on the Blue Funk Broadcasting Radio Network.